Hello, welcome to Ray-ality TV. I'm your host, Raymond Bukhari, and today I'm joined by the Rhode Island GOP Chairwoman, Sue Cienki. Ms. Cienki, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Raymond. Thank you for having me on.
No problem. It's an absolute pleasure of mine to have you on the show. Just diving right into the first question here, the 2020 election is without a doubt shaping up to be a very interesting and unique one. Over the past year, the issues that are in the political spotlight have changed dramatically due to things like the COVID-19 global pandemic, unprecedented changes in our daily life, mail-in ballots, a changed economy, and etc. The list goes on and on. What are some of the key issues the Rhode Island Republican Party plans to address for this election cycle?
Well, I think that we're focusing in on three major issues, and one, of course, being the budget. We know that we started 2020 with a $200 million deficit, and based upon what has happened, what has occurred, certainly the COVID has decimated the economy. We're not getting the revenues that we anticipated receiving, so we know that we're approaching closer to $1 billion deficit. So how are we going to make that up? What are we going to do? So that is really the biggest issue financially. We've got an IGT contract that the state is trying to push through. The contract doesn't expire until 2023, but they were trying to push that through. We had an independent investigation, an independent consultant come in and say we're paying $660 million more for that contract than we should be. So that's a lot of money, and it could go a long way into really evaluating whether that's an appropriate contract to enter into. So that's a big issue, the IGT contract. Again, it doesn't expire till 2023, so there's absolutely no rush to sign that contract, which might have a devastating effect on our entire budget process. We're always looking for line item veto. We always strongly believe in an inspector general to root out waste, fraud, and abuse. So the budget is what drives the engine in Rhode Island, and we think that that is a major focus. What is left in your wallet after the government has really taken their healthy share of your money? The second issue that we talk about is school choice. Quite frankly, school choice specifically for parents that have children in failing schools. You know, the Johns Hopkins report came out. It shouldn't have been a surprise to anybody because 25 years ago in 1993, we had a similar report about the Providence schools, that they're not educating our students. We know that many of the male students that when they reach 8th grade in the Providence schools cannot read at grade level. Well, if you're not reading at grade level by grade 3, the chances of you being successful dramatically decrease. So therefore, that's one of the major issues that we're talking about, school choice. And the third one is, what are we doing with our businesses? How easy is it to open up a small business here? We believe that they're overtaxed and overregulated. So how do we, specifically after COVID, we got $1.28 billion from the federal government to help us through this process. Certainly you wanted to take care of, COVID-related issues, making sure that PPEs were given to the local hospitals and that the doctors had the necessary equipment. But after that, what are you doing about your small businesses? Let's help them get back on their feet. And it is strictly so important to look at those small businesses and say they didn't do anything to cause what has happened to them. It was the government that shut them down. So if the government shut them down, what is the government doing to help get them back on their feet? So those are the three major issues, budgets, school choice, and small businesses. So they're all intertwined together.
Yeah, and you did mention all three of those issues those are mainly like state issues. This one issue that I want to cover while we're on the topic of the key issues is more of a national one, especially as of yesterday, because one big issue is that when the Rhode Island and national GOP were focusing on was mail-in ballots. As recently as Thursday, August 13th, the United States Supreme Court rejected the request from the Republicans to reinstate the requirement that mail ballots in Rhode Island be signed by 2 witnesses. What's the Rhode Island GOP's reaction to this major decision?
Alabama got a Supreme Court decision on July 2nd that said that the 2 signatures and the notary were constitutional. What we found yesterday was the Supreme Court said in Rhode Island it's unconstitutional. So you have 2 different states with the same witness requirements. One is constitutional, one is not constitutional. So does that depend upon the whims of your state officials? Second of all, the message from the Supreme Court was, if you have a state official who enters into a consent agreement that says a law is unconstitutional, that's okay. We don't think that that's okay. We think that there has to be a process. When the governor signed an executive order on the presidential preference primary for June, we objected based on the fact that we thought she did not have the authority to change election laws. And we stressed it very strongly that the Secretary of State, the Board of Elections, and the governor do not have the authority to do that. That if they want to change election laws, they have to go through the legislature. Now, they did. They went to the legislature, and the Senate, on the Senate side, they decided not to take this up. They didn't vote on any change. So if the Senate had voted on the change, the Rhode Island GOP would say, okay, you went through the process, you did it the right way, and the legislature changed the law. But they didn't. And then it went to the court, and they entered into a consent agreement, and they said, yeah, we're going to change this. We don't feel that that process is right. What they have done is they've undermined the authority of the General Assembly in Rhode Island. And we think that's a horrible outcome. If you want to change election laws, and I think the Secretary of State, they want to go to mail ballots, let's look at the process. We looked at what happened in June. We do not believe that the presidential preference primary went off without a hitch. They sent out mail ballot applications to every registered voter. Well over 100,000 of those came back undeliverable. An equal number went and ended up in the garbage because they went to people that no longer lived there. They had moved out of state. 140,000 people requested mail ballots for the presidential preference primary. Only 104,000 came back. That means there are over 30,000 mail ballots that are unaccounted for. We know that 2,400 of those came in after the election, so therefore that they weren't counted. So we think that the systems that we have in place were not built for the either an all mail ballot or an excessive amount of mail ballot applications. And we're concerned, we want to make it easier for you to vote, but we want it harder for you to cheat. And we want to make sure that every vote that someone casts actually gets counted. And that didn't happen in the presidential preference primary. And we also believe that the presidential preference primary was really an inconsequential election. We already knew who the two candidates were going to be by the time we got to Rhode Island. We knew that Joe Biden was going to be the Democratic nominee, and we knew that President Donald Trump was going to be the Republican nominee. So it was an inconsequential election. We already knew what the outcome was. Rhode Island at that point didn't really matter in the national outcome. But in November, that's a bigger deal. That is a bigger deal. We want to make sure that people have confidence in the integrity and the election security that goes on. The mail ballots, a lot of people in June were actually afraid that their mail ballot wouldn't get to the Board of Elections. So they actually had drop boxes off at the election polls and people were walking in. So when they say, we want to do mail ballots for people's health, well, that's a specious argument because people were actually showing up at their polls with their mail ballots and placing them in mail ballot drop-off boxes. So, and we've seen throughout the country that we're not really a country that's built up for an all-mail ballot system. If that's the way that we want to go, let's work on systems engineering. Let's work on getting the systems in place that actually can benefit this. The other thing is that the Board of Elections and Secretary of State said, we don't need the notary, we don't need the witness requirements because we'll be signature matching. Well, there were several candidates that we had that when they went to get signatures to be on the ballot, we made sure that they had a voter registration and list with them so that they would make sure that they asked for people's signatures that were valid registered voters and that they lived within their district. What happened was, one woman went and got signatures. She got 73 signatures, and the local board of canvassers threw out 21 because they said that signatures didn't match. Well, it's okay during getting nominating papers, but what happens when you hand in your mail ballot and it gets invalidated? The voter may not ever find out that their vote did not count. And I think that that's horrible. John DePietro, who's a local radio host, he actually sent in for a mail ballot and it was rejected. His mail ballot application was rejected because they said the signature didn't match. He said, you know, I don't know who signed. He goes, I signed it. That's my signature. Yes, it's different from what you have on file, maybe because I've aged. So those are all issues that need to be addressed before you get to a presidential preference primary.
And this decision with the Supreme Court that happened yesterday in a 6-3 decision to vote against the Republican efforts was a very impactful one, not only for the country, but for Rhode Island in particular. This election cycle is going to probably showcase some very close elections, specifically Rhode Island State House District 15, where Speaker Mattiello will most likely see his third close election in a row. In 2016, as you know, he narrowly defeated Republican challenger Stephen Frias in a very controversial election in a pro-Trump district. The controversy arises from when Frias lost by alleged mail ballot abuse. And do you think this decision with the Supreme Court could create any more questionable election results this upcoming November?
Yeah, it absolutely can. You know, we allow ballot harvesting here, so it's very easy for a group of operatives to go in and grab ballots. Certainly, you know, I am a big proponent of privacy. I like going to the polls. I have in the past used a mail ballot or an absentee ballot because I would not be around for election day. So I understand why you would need one, but I also like the fact that when you go in, you vote, nobody sees your vote. You know, there have been instances when somebody may be looking over your shoulder when you're filling it out. Certainly that is, you know, no system is perfect, and we try to do as much as we can to make the system work for people. But it was very interesting that you brought up District 15, because you're right. In 2016, Speaker Mattiello lost by 82 votes. On the election night eve, he was losing. He was losing, and he made the statement that I'm going to win. Well, how did he know that? Because he had already counted the mail ballots. He already knew how many he had, and the next day, it was determined that he won. You know, it wasn't as close a margin in 2018. So we'll see what happens in this. He's got a cloud of controversy surrounding him, but if he is able to garner and harvest a bunch of mail ballots, then he could quite possibly pull off another win.
And that's not even the only interesting General Assembly election in the state. The General Assembly is going to have a lot of former representatives and senators running back to win their old seats in possibly very competitive elections. And I know that you said this year the party is going to focus on the General Assembly elections, meaning the State House and the State Senate. And a lot of those old representatives like Patricia Morgan are going to run back for their old seats. Do you think it's a good idea to have those former representatives run instead of recruiting new candidates?
Well, you know, we did an active candidate recruitment. You know, we looked at the entire state and we went through a data-driven decision. You know, we knew from the get-go that in 2020, we were not going to field 113 candidates for the State House. We were going to strategically look at certain districts and target those. You know, districts that we thought that we could do well on, districts where there were very close elections, district where the representative is very vulnerable, who has voted against their constituents' interests over and over again. So we strategically looked at those specific districts and we went out and recruited people. You know, we were looking for people, small business owners that have that financial background, that know what it takes to run a small business in the state. I'm very proud of the candidates that we did recruit. And I'm thrilled that someone like Patricia Morgan or Anthony Giarrusso or Ken Mendonca wanted to jump back in the fight. They've been up there. I think that they're valuable assets, and I think that they're going to do very well in their races, and they're working hard. We even have Doreen Costa. She was a former representative. She went in and said, I don't think anybody should live in their seat forever. I'm going to serve so many terms and then I'm going to leave. And that's exactly what she did. And she's been on the sidelines this year.
She's been co-chairing the Trump campaign, right, in the state of Rhode Island?
Mm-hmm. But she looked, Senator Jim Sheehan decided that he was going to retire. So she said, that's an open seat. It's part of my former district. I'd like to jump back in. And she has been out there really campaigning very hard. So I think that she'll be very successful in her race too. And it's, you know, they know what goes on at the State House. It's going to invigorate the Republican Party that we have some really great candidates that are running again.
And while we did see the big number of representatives in the State House and State Senate run back for their old seats, we also saw a few elections where you yourself appointed candidates. What's the difference between, like, say, for example, in District 16, you appointed Mary Ann Lancia to run against State Representative Chris Malaya. What's the difference between a candidate filing to run versus when a state chairperson appoints them? And is it possible that a voter could see that a candidate was appointed instead of running on their own merits?
No, I think that, you know, when they get appointed, they still have to go out there and get the nomination, and they still have to get the signatures. You know, we look at districts and, you know, particularly with District 16 with Chris Malay, he's got a strong opponent in a primary. So it makes it a much more attractive race to put somebody up against him as an appointed candidate. So that's why we jumped in with Mary Ann Lancia. She said, sure, I'll run. But she went out there and she's working for it, and she's working the district very hard.
Was there aspirations from the start for them to run, or was it like kind of a last minute decision where you found the best possible Republican to run?
I think, you know, some of them had thought about it, and then, you know, for one reason or the other, they stepped away from it. And others, I think, you know, you ask and say, have you ever thought about this? And then they seriously started thinking about it and said, hey, I have the opportunity. I can appoint you to run for that race, but you have to work. And all the candidates that we did that for stepped up and are doing it, running.
And now taking a step away from the General Assembly and looking at some of the statewide races, because we do have a candidate challenging each member of our congressional delegation. For example, former state representative in District 16, Bob Lancia, is running against Congressman Langevin. Alan Waters will be running against Senator Reed without the Rhode Island GOP endorsement. And then Frederick Wysocki will be running against Congressman Cicilline as an independent, but to be fair, ideologically as a Republican when you look at his campaign site and his policies. From your perspective, what do you think the chances are of winning one of those elections?
Well, I think the chances are very good for Bob Lancia. I think that Representative Langevin has been in that seat for 20 years. You know, I am a big proponent of term limits. I don't think our founding fathers ever thought that politicians or representatives should stay in Washington forever. I think that the idea was you come in, you give to your country, you give some service, and then you go home and back to your regular life. So I think, you know, Representative Langevin has been there 20 years. And in the 20 years, what exactly has he done for the state of Rhode Island? Well, he's named a post office. That's about it. And he hasn't done too much. Nice gentleman, but really has not added value to the state of Rhode Island. Jack Reed, I think that's a tougher race for Alan Waters to run in. Jack Reed,
because sorry to interrupt, but the last election that he had, he won pretty much by almost, I think it was over 40 points against Mark Zakaria. So it does seem like that's going to be more of a safe Democratic seat. Yeah,
that's a tough race to win. And I think that Jack Reed has done his job, you know, for the state of Rhode Island and brought home the bacon. But it's also another indication of someone that's a career politician. And has he really, when you dig deeply, you know, look at the political opposition research, has he actually done a phenomenal job for Rhode Island? Well, not really, you know, not really. So, but I do think that that's a tougher undertaking to take. And I really don't know that much about Fred running against David Cicilline. I think David Cicilline is number 6 in the Democratic national leadership.
Sorry to interrupt, did Frederick Wysocki, did he ever talk to the Rhode Island Republican Party about this election?
I think he sent me one message that he was thinking of running again. And I also think if you're going to run for national office, you have to start early. You have to have a lot of name recognition. If you don't, you have to raise a lot of money to be able to buy that name recognition to get a fighting chance against a sitting United States congressman. You know, what will be interesting, Raymond, I think after the 2020 census, you know, all indications are that Rhode Island is going to lose a federal congressional seat, which I think is going to have a devastating impact on the state of Rhode Island, because federal dollars are associated with that. You know, I had worked the 2010 census and we had a razor thin margin. There are other states, you know, people are leaving in droves, high tax states, from New York to Rhode Island to New Jersey. People that can are leaving. So other states are picking up more population, and based upon, you know, the trends that we've seen, it's very possible in 2022 that we will only have one congressman. I think then if David Cicilline survives this election, he will have a harder chance running in 2022, because I don't think that his policies and the way he acts up in Congress is going to sell very well in the suburban districts.
That is a fair point to look at, because it'll turn into a congressional district at large, which the whole state of Rhode Island will be voting for that congressional district. But now I want to turn the focus on to the issue of the COVID-19 global pandemic. Our state, as of today, is in phase 3 of reopening the state. Looking at our state situation from a countrywide standpoint, we are doing better than states like Florida. However, we still are seeing an increase in cases and a little more restrictions being put on, like bars are now having to close earlier. What are your thoughts on the way Governor Raimondo has handled the pandemic in our state so far?
You know, I think in the initial phases when COVID-19 came, it's a novel virus. So people didn't know that much about what was going on. What we knew in the beginning was that it disproportionately affects the elderly. So I think that was our lost cause, that we didn't attack the nursing homes. We didn't make sure that everybody going in and out of there was tested, that the residents were tested. But again, you know, you cannot go back as a Monday morning quarterback and say we woulda, shoulda, could have done this, because it was just such a novel virus and you didn't know a lot about it. I think we're learning a lot about it, that again, it just really takes a toll on anybody 80 and above, elderly. That's your most vulnerable population, and that's where we should be concentrating most of our efforts on. It doesn't seem to affect younger people. From 0 to 60, people in that age group seem to be doing very well. They may get it, but they seem to be able, their immune system seems to be able to handle it. But above that, it's a very scary virus if you do get it and you end up in the hospital. So I think, you know, the initial plans, let's be cautious, let's shut things down, let's try to flatten the curve. That was what everybody told us to do, flatten the curve. I think we've smashed the curve. I think we've done an exceptional job at smashing the curve.
So do you think Governor Raimondo's handled it well in our state, or do you think she has or hasn't?
You know, I think initially she did a fine job. It's a tough position to be in, to try to get people to focus in on. I agree with her that the schools have to be open. I thought that her conversation with Dr. Fauci yesterday was excellent. You know, he said, you're in the green, let's get the schools open. The kids really need to be in school. So I thought, based upon science and data, that she's making the right decision for that. But you know, let's move forward.
Yeah, and now going more with the issues, that actually plays into one of my next questions. You mentioned reopening the schools. One big debate nationally and in Rhode Island is whether or not to reopen the schools. What's the Rhode Island GOP's overall stance on reopening the schools for the fall?
Yeah, I think you have to look at the incidence of COVID-19 throughout the state. And certainly there are a lot of districts that can open safely and have in-person learning. You know, all indications are, you know, we were in a crisis and they closed the schools, we did distance learning. Certainly for students that are special ed, that need physical therapy, occupational therapy, extra reading instruction, this has been a disaster. Certain students that have anxiety issues, certainly, you know, doing via computer is fine. Then you look at low income, you know, the income disparity. If you didn't have a computer in your home and you didn't have Wi-Fi, how much learning was going on there? There have been instances of even high school students that were working their jobs 40 hours a week. So they
I
weren't,
was one of them.
yeah, weren't actually attending the classes, or they would, review it later. If there was a family that had 4 or 5 students in it and they all had to use either the same iPhone to get their instructions or that to use like one computer, that creates a lot of difficulties for families. So of course, in-person learning is the best way to go. Certainly the best case scenario. There are private schools that are opening. So why not give the parents the choice? If they want to take the money, let the money follow the student. Again, because if we go to this in-place learning, I just think that there will be such a discrepancy. Kids can only handle being behind so much. 3 and 4 months in the spring, but then if you extend it into the fall, it's going to have a devastating impact on some of these students.
So overall, what I'm hearing is that the Rhode Island GOP are in favor of reopening the schools.
We're in favor. I think this morning somebody told me 85% of the parents are in agreement with that. There are certainly exceptions to that rule where a parent may have a child that's immunocompromised. The good thing is that we've done this learning so that you could have some type of hybrid for certainly those exceptions. But we're looking forward to getting those kids in front of the teachers.
And now going back to the topic of Rhode Island elections, everyone's also going to closely look at the Cranston Mayoral election. Mayor Alan Fung will be term limited after serving 12 years as mayor. And there are currently 2 Republicans and 3 Democrats running to succeed him. Well, technically 2 Democrats. I don't know if we count Adam Carbone, but that's depending on if you're in Cranston, who you consider running on that ticket. There are conflicting endorsements with the Cranston GOP and the current mayor, Mayor Alan Fung, where Mayor Alan Fung endorsed Councilman Hopkins, who I interviewed for my first episode, and then while the Cranston GOP endorsed Council President Farina. Out of these 2 candidates running in the Republican primary, who would you personally endorse?
Neither. I'm staying out of the race. I think that they're both great individuals. They both served exemplary careers on the Cranston City Council. I've wished them both luck. I've said to them both, keep it on the issues, how you feel about issues and don't make it personal. And then after the primary is over, we are all going to get behind whoever the Republicans vote for. And that's the way it should work. So that the party is not taking a stance on either one of them. I've been to both of their announcements that they were running and have wished them both well. They're both terrific individuals.
This next question is now more about the Republican Party itself and the Rhode Island GOP. A problem that the Republican Party has in general is increasing the diversity in the party and reaching out to younger voters. How has the Rhode Island GOP addressed this issue since you became chairwoman of the party?
So it's great. We've actually, Bob Lancia, who's running for Congress, is our outreach coordinator. And he's actually been throughout the state, meeting people specifically in areas that we haven't been before, and making sure that we're seen, making sure that people are seen. We went to the Martin Luther King breakfast. That is an annual event. It's a fabulous event. And I actually had 2 young ladies come up to me and said, I've never met a Republican before. And, wow, you're so nice. So I said, gee, thanks. But now let's talk about what we stand for. And it's very interesting, the Hispanic community, most of the individuals that I've met through several of their faith leaders have come up to us and said, we never knew it, but we're Republicans. We believe everything that you believe in. Personal responsibility. We're huge about family. They're pro-life. So they are happy to join us along. And I actually had the pleasure of actually helping people register to vote that were new citizens. So we are actively engaged in that. Bob Lancia has become a great partner with the Indian community. There's a large Indian community here. I've also made inroads with the Liberian community, who are tremendous new immigrants. They were given asylum. And this was a great example of a wonderful bipartisan effort between Jack Reed and President Trump that gave this Liberian community up in Rhode Island that they now have asylum and they're becoming citizens here. We actually have a candidate, Emmanuel Nima, who's running for District 11 up in Providence. He's a Liberian immigrant. What a tremendous gentleman. So we are making inroads, but the more we are seen and the more people understand who we are, I think the better able we will be to capture some of that vote.
Will there be like a change in approaches for certain issues? Because as you've seen with the Democratic Party, they've now embraced different issues that like 50 years ago, you wouldn't have seen that party embrace. Has the Rhode Island GOP thought of a possible shift in how they approach certain issues? Is that on the table?
Well, I think that you always have to evolve, but for us, we are such strong believers in the Constitution. And that goes back to, again, why we fought the case about the mail ballots. It wasn't necessarily, the issue, but it was about separation of powers. Who actually has the authority to make the laws? And we firmly believe it's the General Assembly. They make the laws. The legislature makes the laws. The executive branch has to execute those laws, and the judiciary gets to decide whether or not that law is constitutional or unconstitutional. We firmly believe in the Constitution, so we're never going to sway from that. But other issues, how we get out our PR, and of course we have to morph and make sure that we're reaching out to communities across the country. And different minority groups. We had last September, we had Candace Owens come in. I think that, we had an event with the Young Republicans at
That was at the convention center in downtown, right?
Yes, that was at the convention center. And we had well over 300 people attend. And through that, we met other members of different minority groups that have come in, after George Floyd was killed. We had a group of minorities come in, and it was a listening. I wanted to listen to hear how they felt, what we're doing or not doing to reach out to different members. So I think that that's been our approach. Let's listen, and then we can tell how we feel about things. But we also strongly believe, in this state, we've had over 80 years of one party rule. The Democrats have been in control of the state. Providence is a mess. You have over $2 billion in pension debt. At some point, those unions that have supported the Democrats lock, stock, and barrel are going to realize they were sold a bill of goods, because the money will not be there. It is going to start running out, and people will not be receiving their checks. And that's based on one party rule. I think to have a vibrant constitutional republic, it's really important that you have more than one voice. And in Rhode Island, we have consistently over the past 80 years just had one voice. And that's not good for anybody, because government should be about opposing views and then compromise someplace in the middle. And that has not happened here in a long time. So we're really hoping that we pick up a couple of extra seats and our voice starts getting stronger. I'm doggedly persistent. So I'm hoping that our message resonates with some people. How much money is the government taking from you, and are they using it efficiently? Your child's not being educated if you send them to the Providence schools, and that's not right. We want people to be successful. We want people to be able to have a good job and raise their families and be able to be successful. The more success we have here, the better it is for everybody.
These last two questions are what I usually do on the show. I call them the icebreaker questions. They take a step aside from the issues and focus more on the person that I'm interviewing in our state as a whole. These next two questions are more of icebreakers. Before you became the Rhode Island GOP Chairwoman, you were the East Greenwich Town Council President. What did you enjoy the most about your time as East Greenwich's Town Council President?
I really loved meeting people that I would never have met had I not stepped into politics. Prior to that, I was on the school committee. I'm a huge educational geek. I have 5 children of my own. So I just loved meeting people. And certainly, the highlight is when you're able to give commendations to people in your town that do something terrific, whether it's a Boy Scout that becomes an Eagle Scout, to an athlete that does something exceptional, to a student that has achieved academic excellence, you know, these things are wonderful, to even the police officer that saves someone's lives, and you get to be part of that. The award ceremonies were always like the highlight.
And my final question for this interview, I tend to ask this for all episodes of Ray-ality TV because it focuses on our state as a whole. Rhode Island is such a unique state. For one, we're the smallest in the country, and two, we're also known for a number of things. My final question is, in your opinion, what do you think Rhode Island is best known for?
Oh, it's the ocean state. It's wonderful. And I'd like to get away from when I travel throughout the country, that people go, oh, you're from Rhode Island. That's the state of corruption. And that just saddens me that that's what we're known for, because I just think we have such a storied history here, and it's so beautiful that I always tell people, Rhode Island, storied history, beautiful landscape, come visit. We're equidistant between New York and Boston. It's
People
just
always confuse us for New York. Sometimes they confuse us for Long Island. They'll say, is that
yes.
somewhere in New York? That's like the biggest pet peeve as a Rhode Islander.
I just go, no. And I actually grew up on Long Island. So I went, no. I have
So you know
moved.
the two key differences between us and New York.
They are both surrounded by water, but huge key differences. And I say to people, you know, a history lesson, we really are the first that declared our independence from England. You know, with the burning of the Gatsby, we were the first ones. Of course, we were the last ones to sign onto the Constitution, which is,
we're the 13th colony out of all 13.
Colony out of all 13. So I said, we've got this amazing history here. I think that we have so much to offer here. And in terms of attracting businesses, if we can get our educational system really back top notch, I think that we'd be able to attract people. We've got, you know, the Port of Providence, we've got Quonset. It would be a great place to attract more businesses. And certainly the president has made, you know, let's get these manufacturing jobs back from China and come back. Well, we used to be a wonderful manufacturing state. Why not go try to grab a piece of that back? Why not try to get some of those pharmaceutical companies away from China, and let's grab a piece of that? That would be a wonderful thing for Rhode Island, because I just think it's such a beautiful state, and I enjoy living here.
It definitely is a beautiful state. We are the ocean state for a reason. We got really nice beaches. We have a lot of things that we're known for, and I'm glad that you mentioned some of them for that final question. Thank you once again, Ms. Cienki, for coming on Ray-ality TV. It's been an absolute pleasure of mine to have you on the show, and I'm glad we were able to make this possible.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, and good luck.
Thank you. And thank you once again for watching this episode of Ray-ality TV. If you're watching this on YouTube and you want to see future episodes, please click the subscribe button down below and the post notification icon to the right. I'm your host, Raymond Bakari. I'll see you on the next episode.